Erica Stark, chairwoman of the PA Hemp Industry Council, new federal legislation bans most products made from hemp. But first, what is hemp and what's it used for?
So hemp is a category of cannabis plant that is used for industrial purposes, and it's also used for health and wellness purposes. So there's two really broad categories that can be labeled as hemp. And so we can get into a little bit more of the nuance of that because it's really been kind of bifurcated by definition in this new legislation. So for the industrial side, it's things like construction materials, bioplastics, textiles, paper, animal bedding, and then you have grain products as well, which would be food for human consumption. Most recently, it's been allowed for use in feed for laying hens. So it has a broad protein and nutritional profile as well. And then on the other side, you have the floral products and the CBD products, which are probably most familiar to your viewers. And then most recently, there's been a flood of more intoxicating products that have been popping up in, gas stations and mini markets across the country.
Erica, how effective is hemp for the treatment of anxiety and pain?
That depends on who you ask. There are people who absolutely swear by it. So it's really kind of an individual thing because it is separate from what we would categorize as medical cannabis, which we also have here in the Commonwealth. But CBD products are commonly used for anxiety. It's used for aches and pains because it's known to be an anti-inflammatory. So there's a whole slew of conditions that CBD products can be used for and are used for regularly.
What's the difference between hemp and marijuana?
Technically, the only difference is the amount of THC or tetrahydrocannabinol in the plant. So by legal definition, now it is defined as the cannabis sativa L plant with a total THC level of 0.3% or less. Previously, it was confined to Delta 9 THC, but the recent change made it total THC. Now, that being said, if you were to look at a plant that is grown for CBD or any of the cannabinoid extracts, you would not visually be able to tell it apart from a marijuana plant. Now, if you look at industrial hemp, like the picture that's behind me in my background, that is a fiber plant. And that looks pretty much nothing like marijuana. So industrial hemp is grown like a row crop, like corn or soy or any other commodity crop. And the cannabinoid floral products are grown more like traditional cannabis, short, bushy plants, wide spacing, lots of flowers.
Erica, how big is the hemp business in Pennsylvania?
Again, there's not a whole lot of data that I have specifically confined to Pennsylvania. The amount of acreage has contracted quite a bit over the last several years. When hemp first became legalized in 2018, in 2019, there was a really large oversaturation of the market and prices kind of plummeted. And ironically, that plummeting reduced acreage, but then industry kind of figured out how to convert those CBD products into Delta 8 products, which became extraordinarily popular, but were also kind of the impetus for this recent closing of the loophole, so to speak.
Erica, what was the biggest obstacle faced by hemp producers on the way to legalization in 2018?
Probably the lack of education and the lack of understanding. Now, I will be the first to admit, as somebody who did advocate for legalization, for the last 10 years, I was one of those people that said hemp is not about getting high. And at the time, that was true. And I did not foresee the time where it would be about getting high. So a little bit of egg on some of the advocates' faces for that, because we just never anticipated that this would become probably the largest sector of the market at some point.
You mentioned a loophole in federal policy a little while ago, so let's explore that. And that has to do with the most recent development about hemp. In other words, what are the circumstances that led to the federal ban of products made from hemp?
All right, so the way the original law was written was that cannabis would be categorized as hemp if it had 0.3% or less of Delta 9 THC on a dry weight basis. Now, Delta 9 THC is what causes intoxication. That's what makes what we commonly call marijuana potent. So the loophole per se is that, well, there's two factors to it. So end use products like tinctures and gummies and things like that, they discovered a way that if the weight of, say, a gummy was because of how heavy they are, you could get away with putting a significant amount of milligrams of THC in that and still have it be legally defined as hemp. And then the other part of it was what's called THCA flower. But so, and I don't know how far we want to get into the weeds here, but so in order for hemp to be harvested under the previous rules, it had to pass the THC test pre-harvest, right? And part of the mandate of testing was that it be done what's called post-decarboxylation. So there's THC and there's THCA. THCA converts to Delta 9 THC when it gets heated or when you smoke it. And so it was tested to make sure that it was compliant after that conversion was made. But because they didn't put that in the definition, technically any marijuana flower could test compliant as hemp if it wasn't tested post decarboxylation. So that kind of created this scenario where states that had cannabis legislation where it was legal, people from there were sending their flower to non-legal states and calling it hemp and calling it THCA flower.
Well, Erica, let me ask you another question because our time is limited. I'd like to know more about the legislation that reopened the government, and I understand that somewhere in that legislation, this ban on hemp products appeared. How did it get in there? And give me some details on what the ban includes exactly.
Okay, I don't know that it's accurate to flat out call it a ban. Now, if what it did was it changed the definitions. It changed the definitions of hemp to be total THC, and it did put limitations on the amount of milligrams of THC that can be in a final product, and that would turn into an effective ban. Now, that being said, it also did bifurcate industrial hemp. It created a new definition for hemp that is purpose grown for fiber and grain. And so that side of the industry is pretty well protected. But on the cannabinoid side, these changes in definition puts a lot of the products that are currently on the market back into DEA kind of jurisdiction as a controlled substance. Now, it's also important to note that this CR, the language creates definitions. It doesn't define regulations or any kind of enforcement or things like that. It's strictly a definition change. And there's also a clause in there that delays the enforcement of it or making it happen for a year. So we have a year to try to kind of well, I'm going to call it fix it, because what they did was they took a hatchet to a situation that really needed a scalpel. Um, and a lot of products that are not intoxicating, that are not dangerous, that people rely on are going to be banned if nothing changes.
Erica,
So
what is your organization's next step to resist this ban?
Well, us as an organization, we're a 501(c)(3), so we can't get too far into the weeds in terms of like trying to change things. We can't lobby. We're here to help educate both the public and people in the industry to try to make sure that they understand what this means in the real world and to help them navigate through it. And of course, we will support things that will promote regulation versus prohibition. And the other thing that we hope that the Commonwealth will do, because this is a federal thing, is that we will try to find ways to have these products regulated properly through any adult use legislation that does happen to pass here in the Commonwealth. Or if that's not going to be imminent, to maybe look at how the medical cannabis program could help make sure that some of these products remain available to people in the Commonwealth.
Erica, could regulation of hemp include testing or labeling the product?
Well, I think it's universally accepted that age gating and proper labeling and enforcement of GMP good manufacturing practices is a baseline standard that is a no-brainer. Everybody agrees on that. Where there's going to be consternation is going to be in determining what the acceptable limits of THC are in a final product. But there's room to negotiate that. I don't think there's any room to negotiate. We need age gating, and we need truth in labeling and testing and all of those things. Any product should have those things, and this is no exception.
According to the Pennsylvania Family Institute, adults and children are being harmed by hemp products. How do you respond to that claim?
I'm not here to argue that, again, they shouldn't be regulated. They absolutely need to be regulated. We've been calling for that for years. So there are companies out there that are doing the right thing and making sure that their products are safe. But there's plenty that aren't. So that is where the need for something to happen comes in. And it's just how we do it. It can be done in a way that keeps public safety top of mind, but also doesn't penalize small businesses and producers and consumers that rely on these products.
Last question, Erica. If this ban stands, what do you suppose the impact is on Pennsylvania's economy?
That's really going to be hard to say, because again, there are a lot of consumers that use these products, and we don't know where they're getting them. Are they buying them locally from Pennsylvania producers? Are they getting them online? I would like to think that if this goes through as is, that the Commonwealth, and particularly like the medical cannabis and any potential adult use cannabis, kind of finds that pathway for Pennsylvania to continue to provide these products. But in the end, I'm not overly personally concerned about the economic impacts. I am concerned about public safety. I'm concerned about the farmers and the small businesses that are doing everything they can to produce a quality, safe product in a completely unregulated Wild West kind of scenario.
Erica Stark, chairwoman of the PA Hemp Industry Council, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.